Welcome in. Do say hello in the chat pane. The recording will be available afterwards. Yep. I think all the sessions are recorded. Barbara might tell us a little bit about that at the end. Right. Shall we begin?
Yeah, let's begin, Alistair. So, hello everybody, and I'm really delighted to welcome you to this webinar today on differentiation. And this is one of a series of webinars that's aiming to support practitioners in developing their digital practice. It's great to see that so many of you have registered for this event, and I really hope that you enjoy the session. My name is Tricia Odell, and I'm joined by Alistair McNaught, who will be taking you through the main part of this webinar. So if we just do a quick bit of housekeeping first. So next we need to just let you know about the chat pane. Alistair's just mentioned this, so I'm sure most of you are familiar with Zoom, but obviously you'll find the chat pane moving the mouse around. At the bottom of the screen you'll see an icon labelled chat. So you'll be able to send messages to either everyone or just some participants by selecting the drop-down arrow. We'll be using the chat pane, as Alistair said, throughout the session. So please do let us know if you've got anything that you would like to say, any questions, and any technical queries will be picked up by Barbara Nance, who's providing us with technical support for the event today. So just the next bit of housekeeping. We'd like you just to check that you have got your name as you've registered for the webinar. So please check that your name in the webinar is the same as the name that you registered with. So that's really helpful for us. And on to the aim and objectives for the session. So we're going to be exploring digital technology, and we'll be looking at the opportunities that digital technology offers to differentiate online learning. And Alistair is going to be taking you through some models that can guide differentiation. He's going to be looking at some technological tools that can help you differentiate learning, as well as looking at some particular pedagogical approaches. And in the final section, we'll have a few minutes to look at some edtech resources that we have available at the Foundation that may be useful for you to have a look at when you're going away from this session and developing your practice in digital differentiation. So just in terms of the session outline, we have it there, split into a number of sections that I went through in the aim objectives. So hopefully that's what you were expecting today. So as a way of introducing the topic of differentiation, we'd like you to just have a couple of minutes to reflect. So if we're looking at the task one, what does differentiation mean to you? We'd like you to just jot some thoughts in the chat pane as to what you think differentiation means in your particular context. So just jot some thoughts in there.
Got some nice range there, haven't we, Trish?
Yeah.
From the resources to the delivery, individual learners. And we've got another 70 people to contribute yet.
Excellent. Brilliant. So yeah, just jot some thoughts down as they come in your head. Really helpful just to sort of have a quick think about it. Any more comments, Alistair, coming in there?
Making resources applicable to all types of learners. We've got different approaches. We've got providing fair and equal opportunities. Okay. We've got reference to different learning styles, different levels, adapting sessions. So I'm skimming down. So the word adapting is coming up quite a lot alongside kind of individual, tailoring individual needs. Needs, that word, if we were doing this as a word cloud, I think adapting and needs would be some of the biggest, and individual would be the biggest. Nice idea here from Subrakali, talking about a model, in fact, talking about adapting tasks, moving people gradually upwards, and Bloom's taxonomy. I like it when people use models. That's something we'll be doing a little later. So using differing T7L methods. So that's a model I'm not familiar with. So I'll be interested in that.
Sorry, that's teaching and learning.
Oh, teaching and learning.
Thank you.
Okay, so a typo rather than a new model.
Yeah.
I'm so disappointed. So,
okay, well, let's go on to slide 9 then, Alistair, please. So, I mean, an awful lot of the thinking that you've been sharing there, I think is coming out in a number of perspectives on differentiation. So if we look at some of the theory, we can see that actually, as we would probably expect, differentiation is a contested term. And some of these names of these 4 particular perspectives will be familiar to you, I'm sure. So Carol Tomlinson, she's written extensively about differentiation, and she seems to be suggesting there. So it's about giving learners a choice about how they're taking in information. And more recently, she's been talking about differentiation as a proactive response to learners' needs, which I quite like. So that really thinking ahead and thinking about the strategies ahead. The second perspective focuses very much on each individual student rather than the curriculum. So all learners have different learning goals and the teachers are planning accordingly. So basically it's quite a mechanistic approach. So it's different tasks for different abilities. And for me, this was very reminiscent of when I was teaching in the 90s. So in an ACL environment. So requiring a high level of planning because you're actually preparing an individual's learning plan for every single learner in your group. And a downside of that, besides the time it takes, is that you're not really developing a sense of a learning community. Munro, he's sort of talking very much about differentiation as a philosophy rather than a strategy. So it's almost like an aspiration. So thinking about teaching and learning differently. And when I was sort of reflecting on some of the perspectives, I think Tom Sherrington's one really stands out for me, really, as being one that contrasts very much with that second perspective that we talked about, the individualized perspective. So he's really much talking about the level of support and scaffolding that learners need to achieve their goals. So everybody has the same learning objectives, but the teacher plans different ways for learners to achieve those learning aims. And in Sherrington's words, he actually says, I think it's quite an interesting analysis. We're an analogy. We're all aiming for the top of the mountain, but some of us are going to need more help, more guidance, more time. And so, in terms of mindset, this is quite an important shift. And I like the way that he says the scaffolding can actually be taken down. It's temporary support. So it means very much looking at the interesting variety of ways that teachers can support and scaffold students to reach what can be quite ambitious goals over time. So there's quite a range of different thinking about differentiation. And I'm going to hand over to Alistair now, who's going to take you through what I'm sure is some interesting and inspirational approaches to ways in which you can differentiate learning in a digital context. So over to you, Alistair.
Okay, thank you very much, Tricia. And I think that's a lovely segue from the Sherrington work about the same learning objectives for everyone, but different ways to support. And I'm going to make the argument that digital differentiation is actually a fantastic opportunity. That digital allows differentiation in ways that traditional methods very often don't. So I'm just going to put it over to you for a minute. How can the digital world, how can digital teaching and learning, technology enhanced learning, just in the chat pane, how can technology enhanced learning support differentiation? How have you done it perhaps in your experience so far with your learners over the COVID time? So different learning environments, James has got going quickly there. Mark's in there. Actually, everybody's in there. Breakout rooms, that's an interesting one as well. So different groups able to work on perhaps different levels or different topics, different styles. different tasks with links to web pages, so that whole web quest area. Voice recorded professional discussions, so again, a different way of working that people that might struggle to express themselves in a 1,000-word assignment. So it's all coming in thick and fast now, far faster than I can keep up with, which is brilliant, because you can save the text at the end of this and get this rich diversity of ideas from different people. So I'm going to give you another minute or so just to pop in the good practices you're looking at. And then what I'll do, I'm sure I'm going to be repeating some of those fantastic practices, but I'm hoping that I'll be adding to them as well. And I've got some nice examples to look at later. So we've got a really wide range there. I like the online quizzes. Karen just popped in there about the quizzes, the polls, the way you can check learning as you're going along to see where scaffolding is needed. That's a really important part. But also different learners can do different quizzes at different levels and build up their own mastery learning. And as Farad's saying there, just the use of a learning platform means a student has their own journeys that they can take. So I'm going to go on and just... Oh, I'll tell you what I'm going to do first. I'll put the captions on. I switched them off when Tricia was going because some of her audio came through, but not enough to be very accurate. So I want to look very quickly at differentiation as a core digital activity or digital opportunity. And some of the things, sorry, these slides have disappeared just off the bottom in converting to Google. But we can differentiate in terms of formats. So different learners will struggle or benefit from different formats, and that might be accessibility related, or it might be preference related. Different pathways to suit different learners, pathways according to ability, according to interest, according to motivation, even according to their concentration levels, different people with different pathways, which you can do through your learning platforms and through your learning design. And so I want to spend just a few minutes looking at this whole concept of learning design and how we might use existing models to guide differentiation. So I've got a couple of examples here that we could explore. Now, the SAMR model, many of you will be familiar with potentially, where you're talking about when you move content online, are you simply substituting what you had on paper? Are you augmenting it? Are you modifying it, or are you redefining it? So here's an example of the resource online, the digital version of the resource. Let's turn on my laser pointer. There we go. A digital version of the resource, which has got hyperlinks as well. So a little bit augmented. And then the digital resource now is online. It's got its hyperlinks, but it's got some integrated or linked quizzes. So as people are working through the content, they can check their understanding. And then the final element, if we took this particular worked example, would be you've got your what was a handout is now a digital resource online with hyperlinks linked to quizzes, but you've actually redesigned this so that the assignments that people do with that resource and based on that resource are perhaps scaffolded for different levels, or different types of assignments are possible. You know, write a 250-word summary or do a 1-minute video clip. So that's the way the SAMR model helps us think about what am I doing, what's the value I'm adding, and where can I add differentiation in here? Because at each of those stages, from the hyperlinks to the quizzes to the assignments, we can be doing things differently. Another model where we can look at differentiation, and we'll get on to some actual examples in a minute, but I think it's good to start with the model frameworks. The TPAC model, where if you're talking about blended learning or online learning or any mixture, technology enhanced learning requires that technical knowledge. What tools might I use? How might I use them effectively? What pedagogically am I trying to do? Because that will inform the tools I use and how I use them. And then what content knowledge am I trying to get across with the students? What skills am I developing? Now, differentiation, in my thinking, sits very happily at that domain between the technological knowledge, and the pedagogical knowledge, because that's about, do I know how to use hyperlinks effectively in order to differentiate content or types of content? Do I know how to use heading styles? And again, people won't necessarily think of heading styles as being differentiation, but I'll show you in a moment how I think they can be. Do I know how to create quizzes, how to create simple assignments that are perhaps different from the normal one? Do I use Flipgrid to get video feedback from students? Do I use a range of tools that would allow me to create assignments that would meet different needs? And the pedagogical knowledge that also is important for fitting that gap between the technological and the pedagogical, it's about gauging the appropriateness of the resources to link to, providing the formative feedback on quizzes. I loved using quizzes with my learners, but I hated the idea of anybody doing a quiz that just says yes or no. So in fact, the best way I found was to get my students to create the quizzes, because differentiation built itself into that, because the weak students would create somewhat simpler quizzes, but by the time they gave the right answers and the feedback for the right answers and the feedback for the wrong answers, they really understood at the level they were likely to grasp. So we can use pedagogy to really differentiate very effectively, providing different journey options. So these are all teacher skills. They're nothing to do with the technology, but combined with the technology, they can make a real difference. There are other models, and I'm not going to spend any amount of time on these because you have access to the slides afterwards. You can follow the links, but if you look down the John Keller ARCS model of learner motivation, attention, relevance, confidence, satisfaction, there are very few areas of that table where you can't say, actually, some of my learners would get successful opportunities, for example, in one way, but a different learner would get a successful opportunity in a different kind of way. So it's well worth looking at some of these frameworks and then working out how you could almost weave differentiation in, how you could exploit differentiation by just looking through a slightly different lens at the way you put together your courses or your content. So other models, and again, I'm not going into them in any detail, but course interaction, the kind of course interactions on the European e-learning model, the way your learner interacts with the course is potentially really constrained or facilitated by differentiation, by good differentiation. Your course experience, the student learning, the student study load, the inclusiveness, every one of those areas is benefiting from effective thinking about differentiation. If we look, some of you may be familiar with the Lorillard conversational framework, and if you're not, don't worry. If you're not familiar with any of these, don't worry. There are ways that you can come back to, have a look and just say, how could that help me planning my lessons, planning my teaching and my courses? But thinking about acquiring, on the Lorillard conversational framework, there's these 6 elements: acquiring, discussing, practicing, investigating, collaborating and producing. Again, most of those have got areas where you could say, okay, what are we doing today? We're going to be working on a little bit of knowledge acquisition, and then there'll be a bit of collaboration and some investigation. And each of those individual elements, you could think through, what are my opportunities? How can I use the technology to help me in different ways? So that's what we'll look at now. We'll look at, how could I use the technology? What are some of the simple things I could do? And some of these are actually really simple. They are so simple, you are probably doing them without realizing it. And sometimes, because you're not realizing it, you're not necessarily exploiting it to its best ability. So I'm going to give you an example using hyperlinks. Now, hyperlinks, obviously, they're great. You can say for an advanced explanation, and then they can click on the advanced explanation, or do you want an intermediate explanation? And they can click on that, go to a different resource, a different page. But let me just show you something that people are often not very aware of, but it's a really nice opportunity to provide two levels of differentiation. So I brought a Word document onto my screen. That Word document has already got some hyperlinks in it. And in a way, that's a kind of level of differentiation. On this particular resource, it's not specifically about differentiation. But what I'm going to show you is how you can take a simple hyperlink that's going to go to something called high contrast, a little plugin for a browser. And if I right click and edit hyperlink, here's my second level of differentiation, because that's the text that's displaying high contrast. I could put a screen tip in saying this tool is useful for people who need ... and click OK. And I'll do the same with the next one. Font size changer, edit hyperlink. And just by clicking on that screen tip bit, which many of you won't necessarily have even noticed is there, I could say this is great if you need to, and again, you don't want to watch me spelling, so I'll take that joy away from you. But now what it means is when I hover over that, this is great if you need to, high contrast Chrome, this tool is useful for people who need. Now just imagine that this is actually my construction, my social care, my A-level sociology, whatever it might be, whatever topic area you're working on. Those could be a link to something where it says, this is a very visual explanation. You might enjoy this if you absorb things that way. Something else might say, this is quite an advanced thing, but if you're going for a distinction, it's well worth you reading this. So there's metacognition building in there as well as differentiation. So that was the hyperlinks, giving learners choices, giving them choices based on level, easy, hard, advanced, intermediate, interest, preferred formats, and so on. Or equally, on this example down in the bottom right, we've got using tabs. It's a great way. When I was working with A-level geography students and teaching about volcanoes, there was no point in me teaching them about the one case study that I found interesting, because some of them would have traveled to Iceland, which I hadn't. Some of them would have gone to Italy, which I hadn't. Some of them would have maybe gone to the Rocky Mountains on a family holiday, which I hadn't. It does sound like I'm very sad, but what is brilliant is that I could give them examples of each of those, and I could say, I don't care which case study you use the one that has meaning and interest to you. And that was differentiation in a different kind of way. And you can do that kind of tabbing in Moodle, Blackboard, Xerte toolkits, and so on. But the last thing on the technical element here of digital differentiation is, I talked earlier about headings in Word being part of differentiation. And just to show you, and this is one of the fundamental things about good accessible content. If I click on any of these, instead of telling me it's Verdana 16-point bold italic, it's actually also lighting up the heading 2. Because when I put this in, I clicked on heading 2, told it was heading 2. That one I clicked on heading 3, that one I clicked on heading 4. Now, the meaning of that is that when I then, as a student, or as anybody, when I get a Word document, I click on View, Navigation pane, all those headings, because they've been put in as styles, all those headings are instantly accessible to me. Why is that differentiation? Well, I argue that that is differentiation because very often different learners on a long assignment or something, they need to go to different bits. They need different parts of the handbook or the course guide or your introduction to hospitality 101, whatever it is in your context. And this means that somebody who's going to be easily overwhelmed by a lot of text and has got 1,991 words to read through doesn't have to. They can open it up, say the bit I need to do for my assignment is about effective text descriptions. There we are, captions, and I'm on the bit on captions. So there's an ancient proverb somewhere that says, do not despise the day of small things. And that's true of technology. Don't ignore, don't gloss over some of the tiny little things that make a big difference to your learners. So here's some other things. It's not just about the technical things. It's about combining the technical with the pedagogical too. So think in terms of glossaries. So just having a glossary at the beginning of the content that you've got on your, on every PowerPoint, if you've got your glossary at the beginning, these are the key terms, then that can make a difference to learners. That can make a big difference to people being able to suddenly think, oh, actually, that's a word I don't know. And it's a technical word I don't know, because for some of your learners with different language backgrounds, with different access needs, there's so many words that they might struggle with the meaning, that it's helpful to know that's a word that I do need to know compared to that's a word I don't know and I know I don't know it, but does it matter? So glossaries. The learners creating resources, that's a fantastic outcome, differentiation by outcome. Wherever learners create resources, they create resources that match their understanding, that match their ability, that match their preferred formats. And I remember one dyslexic learner in particular, because I had set a task that I normally set as a written task, I'd set it as a completely different kind of task. This dyslexic learner, who was always bumping along with quite low grades, ended up creating a resource that was so visually beautiful and clever and effective that I used it in a textbook later with his permission. But again, it was just, I gave them a chance of creating the content I wanted to communicate to them, and they had to go and research it and put it together. So learners creating quizzes, giving options in assignments, experimenting with collaborative approaches, because again, in any group of 4 students working together on a project, there'll be the one that's really good at the research, the one that's really good at writing expressively, the one that's really good at putting together a little infographic or something. So there is an automatic differentiation that comes from experimenting with collaborative learning approaches. And what I'm doing now, presenting using auto captioning, there's a differentiation involved in that. People think captioning is about deaf people with hearing impairments. That's only partly true. Differentiation is also to do with people with different reading levels. And one of the things that's come out very clearly in some of the research recently, and it's been published and advertised on radio as well, has been that when students watch TV, watch videos, or listen to lessons with auto captions on, their reading skills improve, because the matching between what they're reading and what they're hearing is, they're just getting a load of practice at it. So if you want to teach kids, just get them watching videos, but have the subtitles on. So let's go. That was slightly tongue-in-cheek, just in case you decide you don't need to teach anybody English anymore. Okay, another quick look at different types of differentiation, and then I'll hand back to Tricia in about 3 minutes or so. You can do some differentiation in terms of the kinds of questions that you ask people. So this is a really nice question matrix I've got from Teacher Toolkit. And as you go down the questions or along the questions, you get to more sophisticated answers. You're encouraging more sophisticated answers. So that's a way you could work with your learners, and again, get the learners to think about the questions that they could ask one another. There are some things that you can do in terms of the students helping themselves. So I've put some examples there. On Word, for example, when students are struggling because of language level, just make sure they know how to right click over a word. There's a word, communicable. I right click over it, synonyms, contagious, infectious, transmissible. It's more likely I'll understand it having read the synonyms than I would have done if I just looked at it and thought, I'm not quite sure I know what that is. Equally, there are right click search options in Word. We've talked about the word navigation pane already. We've and then similar to that, there's a tool called Headings Map plugin for browsers. You can get it for Chrome and you can get it for Firefox, and that will do the same as the navigation pane for a web page. So you might have a really long web page. You click on Headings Map, just comes up with a little panel at the top showing you every heading on that page. You click on the one you need and it takes you there. Immersive Reader in Word, fantastic for supporting people with lower reading skills. Edge browser has reading built into it, whether it's a web page or a PDF. Select some text, right click and select read aloud. There's the dictate built into PowerPoint and Word for writing, and Google Docs has got it under the tools menu. It's called voice typing. And that's great for leveling the playing field in terms of people who may struggle in some of those skills. And then, of course, getting your mobile phone to do it for you as well, because the mobile phone will read aloud and allow you to dictate. Just a couple of quick examples of where this has been attempted to be put into practice. And again, I'll go through it quicker than makes sense now, but you can come back and have a look at that. But this is just an online environmental science course I put together quite a while ago, where I was thinking about differentiation, skills development, metacognition, all those things, and trying to put together something where all of that was added in the same into the same course, in a way that people could then, if you're an images person, that's your format. You look at the images, the collected images for the week. If you're an affective person, you can't get something until somebody tells you why it's important. Then that's the example there that they could look at that. The links to the exam specs were there. And then on the weekly content, there's the key words. Here's the main points as a bullet point list. Here's the key imagery. And there's a bit for them to create their own questions. So again, it's differentiation. Sophisticated students wrote sophisticated questions. But it meant that they were actively engaged with the content. And that cycles us all the way back to where we started with Sherrington. It's the support, the scaffolding, and the plan for different ways to support learners to get there. So Tricia and I are going to do this bit together. We want you to spend a few minutes. You've listened to me rabbiting on for a bit. We'd like to see, I'll have a look down through the chat so far, but in the discussion, are there areas that you're confident in already and that are working well? If so, tell us, because others would learn from them. Are there specific challenges? Are the key learner needs that the technology might serve, are the key technology barriers for your learners? So it's open for you now while I have a quick look through. And we've got about 4 minutes or so to do this, probably a little bit more even. Yeah. We've allowed ourselves up to 1:15, haven't we? We've got 7 minutes to look at this. Yeah. I like Anthony's question. I think a really important, genuine question there. Is this differentiation? I'm doing something. Is it differentiation? Personalizing questions. I think there are genuinely times when, whether it falls in a specific kind of model of differentiation or not, hardly matters. What matters is, am I scaffolding the students? Go back to the Sherrington quote. Is it a different way of supporting learners? Is it supporting and scaffolding? And if it is, then maybe there's a sense in which it is differentiation. So Judy's talking about the challenge of ESOL learners with very low literacy and or technical skills. When you get that combination of both, and in fact, sometimes it's even it's literacy skills, language skills, technical skills, that can be very challenging. What do I advise? Well, I'm not an ESOL learner. Sorry, I'm not an ESOL teacher. And I suspect there's probably quite a few ESOL teachers in here. So I'm going to hold on that for the moment, Judy, and I'm just going to ask any ESOL teachers in the webinar at the moment. Let's see what you're doing. Can you feed off one another? What is it that you're doing?
And I was just going to say, Alistair, that the Essential Digital Skills Programme, one of the pathways, is actually focusing on ESOL learners. So what we'll do is make sure that we put a link in the notes page so that people can explore those resources as well.
Yeah. And I think, so Anthony, again, has made the point there about Wi-Fi. What will students use? So I think coming back to Judy's point, you may have issues with getting students to use a laptop or a Chromebook or anything in a lesson. But if they are using their phones, then that might be a starting point to start using their phones, not least because their phones have got the built-in tools like text-to-speech under the accessibility settings and dictation in the just in the main keyboard area of your phone. There'll be a little microphone. There will be other issues potentially because they may have very heavy accents. They may not pronounce words effectively, but in a way that can be part of the learning. You know, part of me practicing my speaking is, can my phone understand me? So let's see what other messages are coming through. Confidence with quizzes, challenges, learners accessing online classes on phones. That's going to be increasingly an issue, isn't it? I think that people are bypassing, there's a whole generation that are bypassing having a laptop. They've just got a phone. There are tools that you would use that you could use as effectively there. Sometimes it's the apps themselves. You know, I mean, Flipgrid, Kahoot, some of those tools are good supportive tools. Where the issue may be is that your institutional learning platform might actually be the bit that doesn't transform very gracefully onto a phone. What else have we got? Confidence of building PowerPoints, recording videos for flipped learning. That's great. Areas of challenge of equipment and IT skills. The IT skills, that goes with the territory. You will never, you'll never get to the point where your IT skills are complete. So don't even worry about that. I've been involved in e-learning for 20 years now, and yesterday I was sat with a colleague who was showing me something on PowerPoint that I didn't know you could do. It was a feature that had appeared at some point in the last 6 months. I'd never spotted it, and I'd never used Flipgrid before Monday. Somebody told me about it, so I had a look at it and tried it. So I think in terms of your own IT skills, don't ever think that there are people out there who are naturally IT skilled and there are the rest of you, you know, like me or whoever you might be, thinking I'm not IT skilled. It's not a specific skill. It's just part of learning. There's lots of things I don't know about, but I'm curious. And so I try to model good learning to the people that I work with. Differentiated resources for carpentry and bricklaying. I don't know if you're aware of I mean, they are ancient now, but there's some of them may still be useful. It's is it XT Learn? The NLN materials, National Learning Network.
Yeah.
If they are still around, I've looked at them just in the last year.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you whether or not they've got carpentry and bricklaying, but they definitely had a lot of vocational areas. So used Kahoot with my e-learner. They were on their phones. I mean, that's great. It can work effectively on the phones, but Anthony's saying there, how would they go about using Kahoot and Zoom at the same time? So that's okay. Yeah. So you're giving them the instruction, then you're giving them the link, and then that opens them potentially in a new tab. So, or it opens them in the Kahoot app. So you've got the Zoom app and the Kahoot app, and you're having to get the learners flicking between them. That's interesting in terms of their IT skills. I don't know if was it Amina, if you've got any suggestions or comments in terms of Anthony's response. And that Dee's got an approach there with the Kahoot, give them a challenge, not a live session. So that obviously means that they can look at it afterwards. They'll look at it following a link from something else that you've given them. Okay, I haven't. Are there any other kind of eSol swaps? Because this is your opportunity for a kind of informal swap. You know, I've done this and it works. I had this issue with my learners. I tried it. It worked. So you've got another minute for anything else, any other good ideas. We've seen some good ideas come through there. Yes, PowerPoint. I mean, PowerPoint online can work with on mobile devices, but again, it's that slightly frustrating issue that mobile phones are great, but you have to have an app for PowerPoint, and then you have an app for Kahoot, and you have an app for Flipgrid, and unless you're a student who's got a fairly high range phone with lots and lots of storage space, they may simply run out and just be fed up having so many apps. I like that point, Dee's point about the be careful what you're testing. Kahoot, because of the timer element, or if you use Kahoot with the timer element, that can be really off-putting because it doesn't test knowledge as much as it tests speed of response. And that can be off-putting for people who process more slowly, but are perfectly knowledgeable because they constantly get undermined. Okay, Luba's talking there about if they're accessing Zoom through the app, they should be able to follow the link simultaneously and then go back and forwards afterwards. So that's a useful point to be aware of. Okay, well, thank you very much, folk, for that. And over to Tricia now for the last 15 minutes or 14 minutes.
Thanks, Alistair. So really, what I wanted to do in these last few minutes really was just to make sure that you know about the support through modules that we've got available for you. And before we started, I just wondered if you could use, give us a little reaction, if you have actually already had a look at some of the enhanced modules that are on our website and gone through some of those, or whether you indeed have even taken any badges. So just let us know.
Quick yes. Yeah, quick yes in the chat pane if you've done some badges or gone through some modules. Or a no if you haven't.
Because you may not be aware, but there are a huge number of resources, and often it's about having the time, isn't it, to be able to have a look and source some of these valuable materials. But what I'm hoping to do in the next few minutes is just to take you through some of the ones that would be of particular interest with this particular subject that we've been looking at, the topic we've been looking at today. So before we start then, here's an overview of the modules, the guides and modules that you can take a look at to help you develop your digital skills. So you can see there are two categories of modules mentioned here. We've got some under the heading of connected and effective, and on the right hand side some modules under digital teaching. So the aim of these modules is they're very short, they're bite-sized modules, and the purpose is to give you practical skills that you can try out with your learners. So next slide, please, Alistair. Yeah. So these particular ones will be of help when you are focusing on differentiation. So there's 3 modules there, and in the notes page, we will make sure that we give you links to those. So those are very specifically related to developing skills with differentiating learning. And just as kind of overview in terms of what's on there, as I said, there's a huge amount out there. So we've got this enhanced digital platform, and this hosts 2 fully subsidised training offers to support teachers and trainers in using EdTech and developing their digital skills. So all 3, so worth having a look if you haven't already. So the ETF's EdTech offer, this helps teachers and trainers develop and redefine their practice using technology. And it's underpinned by a digital teaching professional framework, and that's a national competency framework for helping teachers to really look at their, identify what their skills and needs are and progress using EdTech to support effective learning. And then secondly, there's another area of the website, which I briefly mentioned earlier, which is the essential digital skills area. This is an offer to help staff who will be delivering the new digital skills qualifications. So these are related to the upcoming legal digital entitlement, and each offer has its own look and feel and its own menu on the platform's navigation bar. So again, we will provide a link to that so that you can investigate that for you. Okay, so looking then at the badges. So some of you may have already started to gain badges. You can get a 1-star badge if you complete the module. And it's a way of evidencing that you've taken some learning and then applied it to your role in teaching practice. So, and you can add these as digital icons, digital pins to both your Facebook and LinkedIn profiles. So to gain a 2-star badge, practitioners need to reflect on how the learning from a module has supported them to make changes in their practice, and to talk a little bit about the difference this has had on their learners. So that's all about writing a reflection on something they've learned and how they've applied it to their practice. We also offer 3-star badges, and this is where teachers need to develop a resource or adapt a resource, and then they need to think about what change in the practice and the impact on learners this new resource has had. So if you go onto this area of the website, the badge area of the website, you'll see that there are questions for gaining a 2- and 3-star badge, and you're kind of scaffolded through the process of reflecting on your experience and how you put the changes into practice. And the scheme itself really, I think, lies in empowering teachers to take a little bit of time to reflect on their practice. And just, it's all about just trying out and making a very small change, one change. And then the beauty, I think, of the whole thing is that you then, once you've submitted your reflection to us, you receive some personalised feedback from experts in the form of a professional discussion. And this provides both reassurance, but also very specific guidance on further reading and strategies that you can consider. So do have a look, and you need to log in to the enhanced website and then have a look at your My Learning area, and then you'll be able to see the badges that you can work towards. So the next slide then is really about the feedback that you get. As I said, you choose a very specific of your practice, element of your practice, something that you think is going to have a big change on your practice. And one of the things that we're very keen to develop in people that submit these reflections is for them to kind of revisit those skills of critical reflection. Perhaps you haven't thought about since your teacher training days. So really thinking about, your thoughts of the experience, evaluating what went well, not so well, thinking about what you learned and what could have been done differently, and an action plan about, how you deal with similar situations in the future. So really thinking about those skills in critical reflection. And also, you'll be familiar perhaps with the 4 lenses of reflective practice of Brookfield. So as I said, critical reflection is a very key part of the badging process. So next slide then. This one, sorry, I think we might just skip one. So this was about the feedback.
Yeah.
That's the one. Thank you. So here's an example of what the type and depth of feedback, and very, very often the feedback it can be more detailed than this. But you get anonymized feedback from 2 experts who will tell you about what they liked about your reflection. So it's constructive feedback, but also about other things that you may want to think about, other reading that you may want to think about as well, but also signposting to perhaps recorded webinars that could be of use as well to help take your thinking forward to the next level. Okay, well, we've come to the end of the webinar, and just moving on to the next slide, Alistair, that was just revisiting the aims and objectives of the session. We do hope that you have picked up some new skills, some new thinking, some things that you're going to go and investigate as a result of our webinar today. And I'm going to hand over to Alistair, who's just going to quickly take you through some webinars that are coming up in the next few days.
Thank you very much, Tricia. Yes, just a couple of slides, and they've got links. In fact, I'll give you the link to the Google Slides in a moment, so you have that already. We will be sending the presentation out afterwards with a link to the video too. But just something to be aware of. Next week, there are a series of webinars aimed primarily at people in managerial or leadership positions. And so these won't be focused so much on, here's some modules you can look at. It'll be focused on how you might change culture, how you might influence practice, how you might strategize using, is that a word? It is now. You might think strategically using some of the resources that are available to you, and how you might use these resources within your institution to build confidence and capacity. So there's on Monday, we've got one on creating a culture of critical reflection. And then we've got one on accessibility maturity, an organizational approach to legal compliance. This is the FE sector is very vulnerable at the moment because the law changed in 2018 such that all public sector bodies, so colleges, training providers providing services for public sector bodies like colleges, universities, etc., all have to, in inverted commas, meet the accessibility requirement. Have accessibility statements saying to what extent they have done that, and ensure that all the content that the learners are using is free of accessibility barriers. Most FE colleges have only just started down that route, and it is a vulnerable one. So if you've got managers that know nothing about it or haven't really engaged, this is a really good starting point. Digital well-being, very important one, and I know some of the projects I've been working with have just found themselves transformed by taking their digital well-being more seriously. And digital strategies and digital savviness for managers. How do you avoid going down rabbit holes of everybody using different tools and technology? How do you work out, what's an effective way? How do you kind of prioritize what tools and training you're going to give? And then the connected and effective series, much more like the ones we've had today, for perhaps pointing much more at practitioners, people on the chalk face, as it were. Preparing for remote learning is on tomorrow. There's maintaining engagement, ensuring progress on the 23rd, and on the 26th, achieving your goals with remote learning. So they're much more similar to the kind of thing we've done today. So that's it. That's me and Tricia. I meant to have our details up there, but you can contact us through ETF. And I'm going to give you the link now to this if you wanted to go and have a look at it afterwards, because you might want to look at it before you wait 3 days for the link and the PowerPoint to come through. So anyone can view. That's that copied, and it's going into the text chat pane now. Here it is. And do feel free to share that with other folk in your networks.
Just a quick query for myself. That's Barbara. I'm doing the administration and technical support. I've sent chat messages to a number of people because I can't see your registration details. So can you please reply to those in the chat, whether you've registered and what your name is. In a couple of cases, it's not clear what your name is either, and what organisation you're from, please. Thank you.
Nedima, the link for tomorrow's webinars are all in the link I've just shared with you, because they are on the last page, or the second to last page. You can see on my screen, they're all linked. So I'll just pop that link back in there again, so you don't have to scroll up the chat pane. That's the link for the slides that we've been using today. All the other links are on there. So thank you very much, everybody. Have a really good afternoon, and when it comes, have a good weekend. And differentiation isn't easy, and we hope we haven't kind of made it sound as if it is easy. And some of you are struggling in contexts that would test the most brilliant, talented genius at teaching. And we've looked at some of those contexts. Don't give up. Differentiation is achievable, and even if you only get a little bit more differentiation than you had before, it's that scaffolding to support learners to meet what's really good for them, what's their potential. Those brilliant quotes that Tricia gave, that's great. Big thank you to Tricia. A big thank you to the invisible Barbara in the background, who's kept it all going. She might become visible in a minute now that we've mentioned her.
Thanks very much, Alistair.
There she is. Thanks, Barbara. Thanks, Tricia. Thank you, everybody. Have a good afternoon.